Donald Trump has promised since his early days on the campaign trail he would make America win again. And a big part of that focus is on the military. Today he toured the Navy's newest and most advanced aircraft carrier, the Gerald R. Ford, where he met with sailors and promised to make more investments.
Our Navy is now the smallest it's been since, believe it or not, World War I. Don't worry. Going to soon be the largest it's been.
Earlier this week, Trump unveiled a preview of his budget proposal, which he said was public safety and national security focused.
It will include a historic increase in defense spending to rebuild the depleted military of the United States of America at a time we most need it.
That budget plan would increase defense spending to around $600 billion total, $54 billion above the current spending cap set by Congress. But to offset that, Trump would cut $54 billion from non-defense discretionary programs. Those are the ones that fund things like education, health and human services, energy, environmental protection, and more. The White House says nearly all these departments will see cuts, with the exception of those having to do with security and veterans. In addition, Social Security and Medicare, huge entitlements, are held harmless, which means the full brunt of the reductions will be felt by a small slice of the budget pie. And on the other side of the proverbial coin, there are those, including the chairs of the House and Senate Armed Services Committees and a former Navy undersecretary, who says Trump's planned military increase is not enough. Joining me for a discussion on all this are Linda Bilmes. She's a Harvard Kennedy School professor, one of the country's leading experts on the federal budget. Good to see you again. And retired Brigadier General Kevin Ryan. General, it's good to see you as well. We're going to start not in the real world, but we'll return to it in a second. Let's assume there didn't have to be cuts to offset the $54 billion increase in defense spending. On its own, would that make America safer?
Well, I want to dispute this idea that the military is seriously underfunded. The military has actually been able to get around all of the budget cuts over the past decade by using something called the Overseas Contingency Operations
That's
Fund.
$300 or $400 billion on the side,
several
right?
Hundred, right. And if you add up the OCO fund plus the regular defense budget, we're actually at historic highs.
So you say we don't need it?
We definitely don't need to be appropriating more money. We can get it from what we already have in the waste and inefficiency in the defense budget.
Add up all that money for the moment. Does $54 billion on top of everything Linda mentioned, does that make us safer in this country?
Well, I think we're I think we're safe enough right now. That's a terrible thing to get out in front of and then have an accident or problem. But yeah, I think we have a good enough budget. If you add $54 billion, if you spend it properly, you can do some things that you can't do now. But I agree with Linda in that if the point was that we don't desperately need that money to be safer. No, we do not.
Well, there's one person who's probably the highest profile former member of the military who disagrees. Here is John McCain.
There's not enough. There's not nearly enough. And it simply will not take care of the issues and challenges we have. For example, half the F-18s are now grounded for lack of parts, and we have increased operations both in Syria and Afghanistan.
He's a pretty straight arrow. Where's it coming from?
If you have two cars in your driveway and you say, I'm not making enough money to take care of both cars, that can be true, but maybe you don't need two cars. So something else.
Now let's return to the real world and the impact of $54 billion in cuts to offset this. One of the areas that they're already talking about is in diplomatic spending. And General Mattis, a couple of years ago, before he was Secretary of Defense, said in 2013, if you don't fund the State Department fully, and he means things like diplomatic efforts, soft power as it's called, then I need to buy more ammunition. Apparently the president took him literally. Did those kinds of cuts do damage the underlying thing that he says he's trying to protect, this national security effort of his, Linda?
Yeah, I think you can think about it like health care. I mean, you want to spend money on hospitals, but you also want to spend money on prevention and wellness and checkups and diagnostics. And the State Department is kind of paying for the prevention. It's also paying for the maintenance. So after you get the cast off, you want somebody to be giving you physiotherapy, to be taking care of you. I mean, the State Department is doing all of those things around the hospitalization. And you can't have safety and security without all of those auxiliary services which help prevent war from breaking out in the first place and help it prevent.
Yeah,
Do you agree with that,
absolutely,
General?
absolutely. If you go to a combatant commander's office, say in Stuttgart, and the European command commander, he'll have a diplomat there, an ambassador there. He'll have people from all sorts of different interagencies, departments, and they're all helping create security for that region. So absolutely, any decrement to their bottom line has to be made up by somebody else in that team.
Can you imagine General Mattis, Secretary of Defense Mattis, going to the president and saying, this won't work,
I can imagine it, yeah, because I think Mattis is the kind of guy who would do that if he thought.
How about the larger issue of cuts? We know the Environmental Protection Agency that was leaked, or I don't know if how they obtained it. The Washington Post did a thing. We're talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of a quarter cuts across the board. Some programs more deeply cut. Food stamps could be on the chop. A whole spectrum of things. Is that why this increase upsets you, or is it purely because you think the money's not necessary to begin with?
The money's not necessary because the Defense Department has a huge amount of waste. We got 24 federal government departments, and only one, that's the Pentagon, has never managed to pass its financial audits, which means we don't even know where the money goes that they have already.
How much waste are we talking about in your estimation?
Well, according to them, to their own inspector generals and their own consultants, there are hundreds of billions of dollars of waste
Many
in the
times
Pentagon.
more than the president is contemplating adding to the budget.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what I think as a taxpayer is that we need to be fiscally responsible, which means that before we give them more money, I mean, they should be looking at being fiscally responsible and accountable to the taxpayer for the money they already have.
Is it real? I mean, every candidate who's ever run for any office in either party says the first thing I'm going to do is ferret out waste and inefficiency in whatever department is the topic of the day. If those numbers from their own internal audits are real, is that ferretable, outable, to coin an expression, or is that just a talking point? I don't mean that it's not real, but is it realistically gettable?
Some of it is, yeah. Obviously not all of it, because otherwise we wouldn't be talking about it today, and we've had a military since 1776. So this is a problem that's always there with a large bureaucracy.
Are you troubled by this Congress, as you know, I'm sure far better than I believe, has fewer veterans than any in our history, at least any in recent times. I'll tell you, when I watch them not debate issues like war and war powers, and while at the same time they stand up for minutes to show how patriotic they are when the wife of a young man killed in Yemen stands there. Do these people know what they're doing about defense, or is this just armchair general stuff and tough guy talk from a lot of people who really are clueless?
Well, I think you could just look at the two people you brought here to talk about this. You've got a civilian, a professor. You've got a career military guy. Both people bring something to the table and are important to the discussion. I think that is reflected in Congress. I think there are people there who never served who do a great job dealing with this issue. And then there are people, both ex-military and civilian, all their life, who have no clue. So I think it's less about what did you do already than what kind of brains are you bringing to the question.
What's your sense? I mean, did they know? When I've read a lot of your stuff about budget things, and I also was a lobbyist, not a very successful one in my former life, the number of people who I'd encounter who make these bold statements about whatever they care about have such little knowledge beyond the braggadocio. Is that what the basic problem is, that the average member of Congress doesn't know what they're talking about on these things, or they just have, according to you, the wrong priorities? Well,
I think the basic problem is that we've been paying for a war for 16 years through borrowing. We've borrowed every single penny of the $6 trillion we've spent. Now, this has never happened before in U.S. history. In every single war, going back to the Spanish-American War, the War of 1812, right through to the present, until now, we raise taxes to pay for wars. Right now, we are in the first time ever where Americans are not fighting the wars, apart from the troops and their families, and we're not paying for the wars.
Before you go away, though, a $6 trillion figure is being disputed. The president used that the other night. A lot of people say it's $1.5 trillion, and with future costs and veterans and that sort of thing. But so I'm Donald Trump, and I say to you, if you allow me to bulk up my military, we're going to have fewer wars, so I can spend the next $6 trillion rebuilding this crumbling infrastructure that's been ignored by Republicans and Democrats. What do you say to them there?
There are basic laws of math. There's no way that you can cut taxes further. We've already cut taxes in 2001 and 2003. You can't cut tax further and build walls and rebuild infrastructure and give everybody huge tax cuts and give corporations a tax cut and cut and build up the military. It's just not possible.
On that upbeat note, thank you so much, Linda. It's nice to see you.
Thank
Jenny,
you.
It's great to see you as always.
good to
Thank
see
you
you,
so
too.
much for your time.